The year is 2008. The US government has just given a pass to produce food from cloned animals. The estimate for the Iraq war hit $1 trillion, and Christopher Nolan released The Dark Knight. It was a great success, with box office hitting $67 million on day one. And even today, many people consider this to be the best Batman that was created. Fast forward 14 years to present day. DC decided they needed a new film, and knowing their past history with that medium, it needed to be something big. They chose to stick with their strongest asset, Batman. And now stood the question, who would take up the challenge of competing with the best Batman by Christopher Nolan? The job was finally given to Matt Reeves, the director of 2 Planet of the Apes films. Odd choice, given that Christopher Nolan is maybe not on top of his career, but definitely not at its end. But what do I know? Maybe he was too busy playing with his wife, son. I don't know. Never mind. But now stands the question. Does the 2022 Batman compare to the 2008 Nolan's Dark Knight? No, it sucks. I understand that Nolan may not have been available for the film, or the budget wasn't too big to fit his salary, but giving the big release to the guy who made the Monkey movie, after watching this film, I'm convinced that the co-writer of this film was Caesar. On the topic of writing, it's gross. We start off with the introduction of our main antagonist, the Riddler. In the first scene, we see him look at his victim from the window to then sneak into his apartment and kill him cold-blooded with a blunt object. This scene really stayed with me after the film, but not because of how well it's shot or how important it is to the story, but because of how nonsensical the storytelling is in this film. At the beginning, we are given a lot of hints to what the plot might actually be, but then we are bombarded with X-Boys bombs that can very much be told a little more subtly or left unspoken until the inevitable reveal. For example, we have this plotline with Catwoman being the daughter of a mobster that's basically running the city and is a target of our main antagonist. We have the scene where she talks to Batman to ask for help with killing him, but because of it's against Batman's moral code, he tells her not to do it. But she decides to do it anyway. 10 minutes later, we see the confrontation between her and her father, and because of the exposition 10 minutes prior, this scene really has no emotional impact. Now, to understand the dumbassery of this expo scene, we have to lean over the character of Catwoman for a bit. She is so shoehorned in and even contradicting at times. We are first introduced to her by accident, where Batman comes to a bar to ask with another mobster, Penguin, about a girl that was seen with the guy from the first scene, who, by the way, is, out of all people, a candidate for a mayor of Gotham. And yes, because this film is about politics. So Batman spots her weird behavior and decides to follow her home and watch her from the next roof over. Then we learn that she is actually friends with the girl that Batman is seeking. So convenient. She just suddenly goes to a room, dresses up in leather clothes, jumps off a fire emergency staircase and drives over on a motorbike. Batman, of course, like a good creep he is, decides to chase after her. We get to the dead guy's house, Catwoman forces her way into his safe, and this of course leads to a confrontation, quickly interrupted by a policeman guarding the area, since this is a crime scene. We go back to Catwoman's house, where we find out the girl is gone. Oh no, who would have thought? And so that leads into them inevitably teaming up. And here is where the contradictions start to occur. In this scene, we are explicitly told that she is doing it just for the sake of Annika, who is her friend, and the girl that Batman's seeking. But like halfway into the film, we see her sneaking up on mobsters and robbing them for cash, and we are told explicitly that she's doing it for the cash. And like a second later, after we are explicitly told that she's doing it for the money, we see body of Annika. Shouldn't that be flipped? Also, shouldn't there be some time for her to overcome the death of her friend and to finally decide to rob mobsters for cash? Also, there's this weird arc with Batman and Catwoman kissing. Like, they kissed a lot, and the worst thing is that it doesn't even go anywhere. Also following on that pointless plot, we have the scene where, like, Catwoman and Batman are talking to each other, and Catwoman tells Batman that she wants to leave the city, and asks Batman to come with her, and it's like a nice scene, but Batman doesn't give her a straight answer, you know. And I'm like, oh, now you can't be subtle. And there's a bat sign in the back, and Catwoman's like, oh, they already need you. And I'm like, oh, and like, then they drive. There's like a scene, the montage when they drive on their motorcycles away, and they get to like a road crossing, road split. And instead of doing the obvious Fast and Furious bit, there's like Catwoman drives left, and like 5 seconds later, Batman drives right, and I think it's just a missed opportunity. This film is making me angry. I need some tea. Today's video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. It's a brand new immersive RPG title with everything players would expect. It's got immersive storyline, epic 3D graphics, PvP battles, huge boss fights, and hundreds of champions you can collect and customize. It's also got... The water's on boil. So where was I? Oh yeah, the exposed bombs. In this first scene in Selina's apartment, we see she has a pretty big arsenal of weapons, and throughout the film we see her incredible combat skills. So really, that exposed scene with Batman wasn't really needed. If she really wanted to do it, she would have done it herself. And it becomes even more frustrating when we look at the scene a second after the initial confrontation. We see Selina fighting with her father, and simultaneously it's edited with Batman coming to stop her. And to the film's credit, it's pretty okay, it's actually bearable. It's not terribly short, and the editing falls on the pace, so it's actually genuinely watchable, but it's ruined immediately after with the scene of Mobster father choking Catwoman with a cue stick, and of course Batman comes to save her last second. Why not? This film suffers with what I would call a microwave syndrome. It's when the film is built on cliches without adding any more value to them. It's just reheating the same tropes over and over until it becomes just a stale mess. This problem becomes even more painful when we look how much potential value was taken away already with poor character development and a pretty bad villain, which leads me to the Riddler. His character arc is basically a red-pilled Joker. He was an orphan that lived in an orphanage built and run by Thomas Wayne, Batman's father. He promised to rebuild an orphanage and started a renewal fund to make it all happen. After his death, the money accumulated in the fund became a target for every politician that wanted the money for themselves. So it became a fund for bribes, basically. Our antagonist fell victim to that scam and grew incredible lust for revenge to everyone that wronged him, and Bruce Wayne, who was the focus of the media at the time. All he wanted was the truth. He began killing politicians who were responsible for the halt on the project. All killings had a common denominator. All victims had a mouth taped shut with the words "no more lies" written in red in an envelope addressed for Batman. And to that point, I would say it's a pretty well written villain. The slow reveal of his intentions and the concept of riddles is pretty well done. When I left the cinema, my friend said, the riddles were pretty alright. Even I could have cracked them in 5 seconds. And yeah, they were. But what the writers did in the context of solving them, I'm pretty disappointed in. Batman pretty much solves them on the spot, or he doesn't. That's basically the theme here. Some riddles he would solve in 0.5 seconds, to another he would need Alfred to help him, and to just shoehorn into the story to artificially build emotional connection with him. And I'm very much not complaining, Alfred is the best character and should get his own spin-off. Now going back to the Riddler, what I really dislike about this character is probably the acting in the last confrontation scene. He's played by Paul Dano, who's most notably played in There Will Be Blood as Paul Sunday, and in a Netflix remake of a Danish thriller film, The Guilty. His acting is underwhelming. I went to see this film not expecting much really, because I knew it wouldn't come even close to the predecessor, but I at least expected a well-played villain. We knew what his motivation was, we knew his character, We knew his demeanor from countless live streams and video messages that were shown throughout the film, but the final still felt odd. In Nolan's Dark Knight, we also knew what Joker would look like. When he committed his atrocities, he was proud of it and the camera work underlined it. Here we have a silent killer that also has folders on everyone and also shows off his knowledge in like live streams on the internet hidden behind a leather mask. If the desired effect was to cast someone to encapsulate the sense of creative misdirection of the screenwriters, then they succeeded. On the topic of acting, I personally don't understand the choice of casting Robert Pattinson as the Batman. He just looks like that emo kid from school that you're sure is addicted to crack cocaine.
Just say where's the cocainer? In my nose, Mr. Witter.
But for the most part, the acting is not terrible, it's just the screenwriting that ruins it all. Now onto the music. It's not bad, it's just strange. The score for the film was made by Michael Giacchino, and it's a mixture of Hans Zimmer tier eerie music with a few orchestral tracks, and a song that could only be described as Radiohead, but if Tom Yorke was dropped right after birth. I mean, it's not terrible, it fits the theme of the film pretty nicely, but just this rotation of Hans Zimmer, orchestra, Radiohead, it just doesn't go well with each other. Speaking of things that don't go well with each other, the visuals. Oh, those segues. This film mostly operates on contrast between light and dark, but in a really unthought out way. It just looks like Matt Reeves watched The Dark Knight and said, this film is really dark. It gives it a really good mysterious atmosphere. If I make my film even darker, it will make my film even more mysterious and my wife will finally let me meet my kid. It's just very, very unorganized. The contrast between light and the dark is just there for the sake of it. I think the best example of this is one of the last scenes. Batman was just shot and nearly died and was magically saved by Catwoman for the last second, because of course he was. Then he sees Catwoman in trouble, so injects himself with some green stuff that gives him a boost to defeat the enemy and beat him up. Gordon finally splits them apart and has the guy being beaten for his name. After he replies Revengeance, that was the name that everyone called Batman throughout the film, he has some sort of a mental breakdown, shoots up a grappling hook onto an electrical box, swings across the room to then cut off his robe he was on, lands in the sewage water, lays in it for a bit, to then get up and light up a flare. I do not believe that this scene was not written into the script with its sole purpose being recording it and putting it into the promotional material. Speaking of segues, dialogues. This film is a certified buzzword haven. The writing is so terrible, when you find that one good line, you feel that moment of relief. My favourites include,
"You got a lot of cats.
Never think about strays.
Selena, don't throw your life away."
Don't worry, honey. I got 9 of them.
it's always that light at the end of the tunnel. It may be terrible, but at least I got to see that scene or that scene. And I think this is the best way to describe this film. I did spend my $10 on it, but at least I got to see it and I get to make this video. I don't think that this money has gone to waste. Because I didn't enjoy the film doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy the whole experience. I really liked just talking with my friends, laughing at its flaws. I'm a person that if I see a film that I don't really like, to occupy my mind I would start to analyze it. Because if I were to criticize it later, I have to know why I don't like it, what makes it so bad. And what's most important, why is it bad to do those things and how to make them better. Like Quentin Tarantino once said, if 1 million people see my film, I hope they see 1 million different films.